Good day, Internet. Chavez and Valko here, the key to your immigration solutions. I am Senior Associate Benjamin Hamilton. And you know, when you see me, that we are here to talk about all things employment based immigration. And today we're going to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of applying for a visa. Not any specific visa category, but rather just how do I apply for a visa? Where do I go? What do I do? So today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the actual visa appointment itself. We're probably going to reserve that for another video to talk more in depth. Today, though, it's just about where do I go? How do I schedule? How much does it cost? What do I need to do to apply for a visa? So the first step you have to know when applying for a visa is you have to fill out what's called a DS-160, right? Now, there is a website that we've linked down below that you go to in order to do this. If you want to know, well, what is this? In short, it's kind of like a background check in terms of you're going to put in a lot of personal information that they're going to then save and be able to review during your interview. And we're going to actually go through that right now. So if we pull up the website here, you'll see basically the first thing you have to do is select the location. So it's a drop-down menu where you'll see all the different embassies and consulates. You punch in a little code and then you type start an application. And then you jump right in. The one thing I want to warn you is this website is absolutely terrible. Terrible. Everything's capitalized. You can't use any punctuation. You can't copy and paste into it. And it routinely times out at about 10 minutes. So if you're just in the middle of working on a page, because you're going to see that it goes page by page by page. If you're in the middle of working on a page and it times out, you lose the whole page and you have to log back in. It usually takes about an hour to do a DS-160, and you have to do a DS-160 for each family member that is applying with you. So this is a chore that, depending on the number of family members you have, could take 3, 4, 5 hours. Again, just be forewarned, you're going to get kicked out multiple times while you're working on it because it just automatically does it around every 10 minutes or so. The other thing to remember is do make sure that you write down the DS-160 number, because in order to log back in, you don't create an account, right? So every time it saves no information for future use on a visa renewal. So every time you get a new DS-160 number, you have to remember that number. And then it asks you your last 5 letters of your name, your birth year, and then a security question. And that's what you use to get into the DS-160. So it's really important you write down that DS-160 number. Now, the reason we're starting with the DS-160 is because in order to apply, to go to the other website we're going to talk about later and apply for a visa, you have to enter the DS-160 number. That's why the DS-160 is the first step, because you can't even go to the other website to apply for a visa unless you have a DS-160 number already. Now, it is possible to just start the DS-160, save it, go to the application website, do all that, and then come back to the DS-160 and complete it. That is possible to do. So we're going to jump right in here to the first page of the DS-160 and see all the fun information that we have to give them. Obviously, first is what's your name? Have you used any other names? They ask it, sex, marital status. Let's drop down a little bit more to the next page here. They obviously ask about your date and place of birth on the next page. There we go. Page 1, pretty straightforward. It is a key, though, that you get page 1 done quickly. Because remember, in order to log back into a DS-160, it asks your birth date. Well, it gets your birth date when you complete the first page. So if you take more than 10 minutes to complete the first page and it times out, you literally have to start all over again because you lost that DS-160. So it's kind of critical that you complete the first page in under 10 minutes. Anyway, jump to the next page here. You're going to see that they're starting to collect a lot of personal data. So where are you from? Like what's your nationality? Do you have a second nationality or permanent residence? Do you have a national identification number, social security number? Right. You can also see there that there is a box to check does not apply. When it comes to DS-160, you have to answer every question or won't let you move to the next page. So either you check does not apply, or there's sometimes you just put NA into a box, but most questions, well, pretty much all questions, they have to be answered before you can move to the next page. So let's go to the next page here. So it does ask why you're coming. So this is where there's a drop-down list, and this is where you can select tourist, investor, H-1B, OR, whatever it is. And then once you select the class, it asks a second question that where it says specify, please select. That's where you were, like, for example, if you were an H-1B, or you would select whether or not you're a dependent or a principal applicant, right? It asks, have you made specific travel plans? This is a common question we get about, well, intended date of arrival. What do I put there? That's speculative, right? They're not going to hold you to that. So if you're thinking, oh, well, I'm going to have my visa appointment roughly in the middle of July, and we're thinking about travel in the middle of August, so we're just going to put August 15th. That's fine, right? They're not going to hold you to specific dates. It's just an estimate. Also, intended length of stay, right? There you can put, days, months, years. What we tell people is select the maximum amount allowed for your visa, right? The exception would be tourists, right? If you're a tourist and if you're applying for a tourist visa and your intended trip is 2 weeks, put 2 weeks. But if you're an H-1B, the max allowed is 3 years, put 3 years. If you're an E2, E1, the max allowed is 2 years, put 2 years. TNs are 3, Os are 3, Rs are 2.5, right? So put the maximum allowable for your specific visa category. And again, we're not talking about the length of the visa. We're talking about the length of the status. So a lot of people only apply for investor visas. They can get up to 5 years on the visa, right? The visa has nothing to do with how long you can stay. That's your status. The status is only 2 for an investor. So we put 2 there. So again, intended length of stay is an estimate. Intended date of arrival is an estimate. Intended length of stay is based on your visa type. Then you select person who's paying for it. If you select yourself, it asks no further questions. If you say it's like there's an option there for like your employer, then it does have some additional information you have to fill in about the employer. So jump to the next page. It does ask about if anyone's traveling with you. So obviously, if you're traveling with your family, you would check yes, enter the names, and then it asks you for the relationship. So you can put, child, spouse, no big deal. Next page. Now, this is where it asks a lot of information about your previous history in the United States. Here, it doesn't look like a lot of questions, but these are mostly dynamic. So if you do answer yes, it does open up and start asking you a whole bunch more questions. So for example, if you say yes to have you ever been in the US, it then asks you to list every time your last 5 entries to the United States, right? So it asks the date you arrived and how long you stayed for. So if the last 5 entries were all as a tourist, you'd put the date and then like 2 weeks, date 1 month, date 3 days, whatever it is, your last 5 entries. Have you ever been issued a US visa? You check yes. And then of course it asks you for the details about that visa, when it was issued, what the number on the visa is. Asks, are you applying for the same type of visa? Are you applying in the same country? And have you ever been 10 printed, meaning you've ever been fingerprinted before? Has your visa ever been lost or stolen? And has your visa ever been canceled or revoked, right? So obviously if you check yes to that, it opens up additional questions. So if you're applying for like a work visa and you've previously had a tourist visa, you would check yes and enter in the details for your tourist visa. Now, I remember when I asked for the visa number, it's kind of confusing because there's a couple different numbers all over the place. If you look on the right side of your visa, you're going to see a number in red, right? On the right side. That's the one they're looking for. There's like a visa control number. That's not it. It's the red one usually on the right side. Obviously, it asks, has you ever been refused a visa or been refused admission to the United States, or withdrawn your application for admission, right? If you check yes, a box opens up and you're allowed to provide some additional information. It may be that you just applied for a tourist visa and were denied, and then you're just reapplying, or maybe you were denied a tourist visa, but now you're eligible for an H and you're applying for an H. You just check yes, explain what happened. Has anyone ever filed an immigrant petition on your behalf? The key here is when they say immigrant petition, that is residency, right? That's not like, my employer is trying to sponsor me for an H. Well, that's not an immigrant petition. An immigrant petition is an employer has filed an I-140 sponsoring you for residency, or a family member has filed an I-130, right? And if you check yes, you're going to provide details, right? So for example, a lot of times if a brother is sponsoring a sister, those are backlogged, can be 10 to 20 years. So in the explanation, you would say, well, my brother filed an I-130. The priority date is in 2015, which is still 10 years out, right? So you're kind of indicating to them that this has nothing to do with this visa application. Anyway, jump to the next page here. Start getting into some more of that personal information, home address. I mean, this is literally just where you're living right now. And it starts to ask for, phone number and some other personal information. So I guess if we go to the next page, does ask for your email addresses, and it wants to know all of them that you've used in the last 5 years. And the social media one is relatively new. This was added a couple of years ago, where you're able to select the platform and then put in your social, like your identifier, right? So this is, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, right? You name it, whatever it may be in your, country. If you see there's a list there. And then at the bottom, if there's one that's not in the list, right, it asks, well, do you wish to provide information about your presence on any other website? So maybe something that's not in their list. So they do want to see all of your social media. And guess what? I don't know if they look at it in every single case, but they do look at it. And there's been cases of people getting dinged specifically for something showing up in their social media. So just FYI, you might want to be careful what you post there. Go to the next page. And now we're getting into your passport info, right? So what is your passport type, passport number, what country issued it, expiration, all that's pretty straightforward. So jump to the next page. They do ask for a contact person in the US. That can be a friend, a family member. You just put in their name and then the relationship to you. Again, it can be anyone as long as they're in the US and know who you are. Next, they ask about family. So you have to put in your parents' information, no matter what. Now, obviously, you can put do not know if you don't, for example, don't know who your father is. You can check do not know, but otherwise, you do have to enter this information. It asks whether or not they're in the United States. And then down below, it asks, well, do you have any other immediate relatives, right? So they want to know brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts, or whatever. Actually, this question here is limited to it says husband, wife, son, daughter, brother, sister, but there's actually one more question below that we didn't quite pick up in this thing that asks, do you have any other relatives? So they ask immediate relatives and then any other below that. So they do kind of want to know everybody. Go to the next one. They start looking into your current occupation and education and experience. So they ask what your occupation is. There's a whole list. Common one, there's one that says business. There's also like a homemaker if it's like a housewife that's not, working. But obviously here's where you put in your current employer information. Obviously, if you're renewing a visa, this will be a U.S. employer probably. But if it's the first time, they would expect this to be a foreign employer. And look, if you're not employed, you can just put not employed. But they want to see if you are employed, your start date, monthly income, description of your job. So we'll go to the next one here. It asks, were you previously employed? Obviously. So if you check yes there, then you're able to put, it's kind of like filling in a resume, right? Where you're now putting in information about your previous employers, including job title, supervisor's name, start, end date, job description. If you go to the next page, they ask about education. So here's where you're able to, if you select yes, if you went to university and you have a degree, you'd be able to put it in here. If you look down at the bottom of a lot of these questions, you'll see where it says add another, right? So if like my most recent education was a master's degree and I entered all this information, I'd click add another and I could add in my bachelor's education. Anyway, go to the next screen and some more information. Do you belong to a clan or tribe? Yes or no. Do you speak any other languages? You can add all those in. And then they ask about travel history. Have you traveled to any other countries, regions within the last 5 years? If you check yes, it opens up and then you have to list every country you've traveled in the last 5 years. FYI, if you're applying for a tourist visa, whether or not you've traveled internationally is actually a big deal in terms of whether or not they want to approve you. So if they see that you're someone that has traveled internationally, you're more likely to get approved than someone who's never left your own country. And then we start kind of getting into some of the security questions. Have you ever been in the military? Do you have any specialized skills or training? So if we go to the next slide, we get into the security questions, right? I'm not going to get into these one by one, but you can kind of pause and see what some of them are. So we'll go to part 2. A lot of them about communicable diseases, mental health, in terms of violent offenses and all of that, money laundering. Go to number 3. Espionage, terrorist organizations. Go to number 4. Right, more information. And if we look here, this is where you kind of get into the one that's a little bit more relevant. Have you ever been unlawfully present, overstayed the amount of time granted by an immigration official, or otherwise violated the terms of a U.S. visa? So it's like if I came as a student and I worked, right? Or I came as a tourist, but I overstayed, 2 weeks, right? You have to check yes. If you check yes to anything here, a little box opens up and you're allowed to put in an explanation. So it is key to be honest. If you check no, and you should have checked yes, and they later find out, they will charge you with a fraud or misrepresentation, which carries a permanent bar to the United States. And they take that very, very seriously. They come down very hard on people that they find out lied, right? Remember, if you overstayed by 2 weeks, you're not inadmissible. They will take that into account, but it doesn't immediately bar you, right? You have to overstay by 6 months to be immediately barred. Go to the next page. Again, have you ever voted when you weren't supposed to? Have you renounced U.S. citizenship before? Right? Just more security questions. Another big one down here at the bottom is, have you ever attended a public school when you weren't supposed to? That can always come back to bite you too. Anyway, go to the very last page that we have here. This is, so if you were doing a tourist visa application, it would kind of end with the security questions. But if you're doing like a work-based visa, then it adds on additional pages. And those pages can vary based on the visa type. So here, this was a TN. So it's asking for, the name of the U.S. employer, address and monthly income and all that. The ones that have the most added on are the e-visas for investors and trade. Those DS-160s for the principal applicant, not for the family, but for the principal applicant, will add an additional, it's like 6 or 7 pages. Where you have to put in the investment info and the income of the company and the number of employees and job descriptions. It's a whole bunch of info. We tell clients, fill out the personal stuff, then send to us to review and fill out the e-visa component. Also, what we didn't put here is you have to, depending on where you're from, you may have to upload a picture, a passport photo. So for example, if you're like from Mexico, they'll do the biometrics in Mexico. You don't have to upload a photo because they will do it there. But a lot of countries, like all of Europe, right, when you get to the end of the DS-160, you have to upload a passport style photo. Sometimes it can be tricky. The system will reject it, and you got to kind of play with the photo to get the system to finally accept it. And then the important thing is at the end, you confirm the DS-160. Remember, we said that you can always save and come back. But before your actual interview or before you submit your case, you have to confirm the DS-160, right? And then you will get an actual little 1-page confirmation with a barcode. That's critical, right? Because obviously you have to have that with you when you go to your interview. So again, at the very end, you would likely upload a photo, confirm your DS-160, and then make sure you print out that confirmation. Once you've confirmed a DS-160, you can't go back in and look at it. So when you confirm it, you do get the option to print off the full application if you want to keep it for your records. You do not need to take the full application with you to your interview. The officer doesn't want to see it. They just want to see the confirmation. But you can print it off for your own records. Right. Moving on. DS-160, right? You got to do this for every visa anytime you apply for a visa. Unfortunately, you don't get to create an account where it like saves the info and you can come back and reload. It just doesn't work that way. It's just a new one every single time. And you have to do one for each family member. Eats up a lot of time. So now we're going to talk about how to apply for a visa. And that's not as straightforward as you think. Why? Well, because it turns out the U.S. State Department uses 2 different websites to apply for visas, and which website you use depends on the consulate where you are applying. So you need to go to the embassy or consulate website to see which of the appointment websites they use for scheduling appointments. So the first one we're going to talk about is called U.S. Travel Docs. right? So again, if you go to the US Travel Doc website, you'll see that there's a list right here. There you go. There's a list of countries. So for example, if you were to choose Mexico, it would actually just kick you to the State Department website because Mexico does not use travel docs. But if you go to India, right, then it will take you into the travel docs website to start scheduling an appointment. So we'll go to that next page here, and you'll see now I selected India. So now it's like, okay, do you have an account and want to log in, or do you need to create an account, right? So you create an account, go to the next website, next page. Here is kind of like your home page for your account. Right now, you see there's these little boxes down below. There's 6 of them. There's nothing in them because there's no appointment scheduled. Once your appointment's scheduled, you'll see information in those boxes like, visa information. It'll say like, I don't know, H-1B, visa fee payment. I'll have the payment there, family members, all that. Anyway, in order to start the process to apply for a visa, if you look up in the top corner, it says new application/schedule appointment, right? So we click on that. It asks us to select, hey, are you applying for a non-immigrant visa or an immigrant visa? Obviously, non-immigrant is like a temporary work visa. Immigrant is I'm applying for residency. It also, specifically in this case of India, it also asks what state you live in and what language you want to apply. Again, that's for India. Go to the next page. Once you've selected all that, it then asks you, well, what category are you applying for? Tourism, L1, or other employment-based, right? So obviously, if I was like an H, I would click employment-based visas. And then you go to the next page. And then here's where you enter in all of your information. So passport, number, issuance, nationality. And then if you see down here, DS1, kind of in the middle there, DS160 confirmation number, meaning you can't schedule an appointment until you have that number. It says confirmation, but like I said, it doesn't actually have to be confirmed in order to go over. You just have to start it. And the DS160 numbers, they start with the letters AA and then a bunch of letters and numbers, but they always start with AA, right? So you get that AA number, and then you can go to this part. And I think there's some more information here. I think there's another page here. Where you can see your mailing address. And then obviously, because we selected employment-based visa, down here at the bottom, there's a section for petitioner where we can put in the petitioner's name, start date, receipt number, and expiration date. So obviously, you do have to have the receipt number if you're applying for an employment-based thing, kind of like an H, meaning, if you got selected, but your company hasn't applied yet, you can't go ahead and schedule an appointment until at least the company has submitted the application and gotten a receipt number, because you need the receipt number to go through the process. The other thing you'll be able to do, obviously, is add family members, right? So you can use that one account to add the principal applicant and then spouses and children under the age of 21. You can add them all into the account. Now, regarding payment, we're going to talk about that in a second in terms of paying the visa fees. But first, we're going to jump into the other website that the State Department uses. So this is U.S. Visa information, and I don't remember the full name of this website. We just call it U.S. Visa. Again, you go to the embassy and you see which one they want you to use. In this case, this is Mexico. Right? So you click, apply. You go in. It asks you to either log in on the next page or create an account. In this case, we created an account. Well, this is a screenshot from Argentina. Cool. Awesome. But anyway, you see your account here, and then it asks you to add applicants. So I would click continue, the green button that says continue, and I go to the next page, and then it says add applicant. And obviously, here's where I can add each of my family members one by one, right? So if I have a wife and like 4 kids in my case, right, I would do the add applicant thing, 6 times total. I'd add myself, my spouse, all my kids. So when we click add applicant, we go to the next page. And kind of like with travel docs, right, you're entering in all of this information, mostly passport. And look right there in the middle, DS160 number again, right? So you have to have that in order to try to schedule an appointment. Visa class, date of birth, gender, phone, email address, right? It asks if you ever issued a visa, and are you traveling from another country to apply for a U.S. visa in Argentina, right? So obviously they do distinguish between someone who is from that country and someone who is not. And if you're not, you're what's called a third country national, right? And their appointment scheduling system treats you differently if you're a third country national. So if I'm an Indian national, trying to apply in Canada, there's less slots available for third country nationals. And right now they're like, I don't even remember if Canada's even doing. I know Mexico stopped doing them. In Canada, it was backlogged like over a year. If you're legally residing in the country, but you're not from it, they typically don't treat you like a third country national. So if I'm an Indian national, but I'm currently living in Canada on a work visa, then, and I want to apply in Canada, then typically they don't treat you like a third country national. Right now, there's very few posts that accept third country nationals. Historically, Canada and Mexico always did for renewals, but even now, like because of COVID and everything, and limited availability, like they're not even taking third country nationals. It's kind of a hard thing to find. So if we go to the next page, it asks you to select where you're going to pick up your documents, and this is kind of the same in both systems, right? A lot of places you have to select a DHL location, right, to go and pick up your documents. I think in Argentina, it's like literally like Buenos Aires and Cordoba. That's like your only options. Mexico, there's usually one in every city that they have a consulate in. FYI, that is something that you can change after the fact. So if we go to the next page, now we're going to talk about, well, not so much a page, but the next kind of thing is payment, right? So if I were to continue in the Argentine version of that website, it would allow me to pay via credit card because it's the year 2022 and that's what makes sense, right? And a lot of posts, it doesn't matter on the website, right? It matters on the country. So in both travel docs and US Visa, right, there are certain countries where I can make that payment via credit card. When I say payment, that's the Visa application fee, which can be $160, $190, or $205 per person. I'm thinking the non-immigrant work visas, right? $160, $190, $205 per person. But there's also a lot of countries that, for whatever reason, in the year 2022, require that payment be done physically at a bank in the country. Mexico is one of those. They used to be online. You used to be able to do it with credit cards, but they reverted to bank payments. So when you would have moved to that payment page, this is what you get. You get this receipt that you then take to the bank, Scotiabank or Banamex in Mexico to pay. If you're like, well, I'm in the US right now, I'm trying to renew a visa, like, how do I do this? You just send this to a friend or family member and have them go pay it. Once it's been paid, about 24 to 48 hours later, it's reflected in the system. You can log back in and then move to the next screen, which is where you actually schedule your appointment. So we'll go to the next screen here. So again, this is how it looks on US Visa. I would select the location. Again, we're back on the Mexico one. So, is it Merida, Mexico City, Ciudad Juarez, Monterrey, Guadalajara? You select the location and then you would select date of appointment. That's where you'd click on that and see the calendar. Just as an example, if I was trying to schedule a TN, right, I could only select Mexico City, Juarez, or Guadalajara, those three. And then when I get the date of appointment, they're like now in July. So like you'd see May and June would be like all blacked out, and you'd select one in July. And then when you select the date, you select the time of the appointment, and then down below you select the ASC location. The ASC location is something unique to specific countries like Mexico. A lot of places, like if I go to Canada, there's no biometrics, right? I just do my DS-160, upload my photo, go to my appointment. Mexico and some other countries require that you first attend a separate biometrics appointment. In Mexico in particular, it's off-site usually, or like next to the consulate, and it's run by a contractor. It's not actually run by the consulate or embassy. The other thing to know about Mexico is the ASC location does not have to match the appointment location, right? So if you're like, well, I'm doing an investor visa, that has to be done in Juarez. I live in Guadalajara. Can I do my ASC appointment in Guadalajara? Because there's a consulate there, but then have my interview in Ciudad Juarez? Yes, right? So the ASC address doesn't necessarily have to match, especially if there's going to be a big gap between when you have your ASC appointment and when you have your interview. FYI, certain visa categories like E2, you can't schedule an appointment. You have to pre-submit your case. You make the visa fee payments. You confirm your DS-160s. You mail, either email if it's to Mexico City, or physically mail if it's to Juarez, or email if you're doing E1 to Monterrey, Tijuana. But anyway, you physically mail your case, and then you wait for them to review, and then they come back and tell you when your appointment's going to be. That is very common for investor visas. I mean, Canada does that, pretty much London, pretty much everywhere these days. The e-visas are like pre-submitted, and then you wait, and then you get an appointment after the fact. Everything else, right, you're doing it through the system. So a couple of things to remember. DS-160 website sucks. We just have to deal with it. It's going to time you out. It's going to kick you out. Make sure you write down those details. Start your DS-160 first. And then if you want to just save it and jump into the appointment stuff because you needed the number, great, do that, and then come back. Make sure you confirm it at least 48 hours before your interview. The DS-160 does ask for the location of your interview. If you later change your mind, so like I confirmed the DS-160 for Monterrey, but then when I go to schedule my appointment, I schedule it for Mexico City. What do? You can still use it. Historically, in the past, they used to say, no, you have to do a whole new DS-160 because you chose the wrong location. If you go to the Department of State website, it specifically says on the website, that's okay, right? As long as all the other information is still accurate in the DS-160, you can actually use it. Now, sometimes you run into issues at the ASC, the biometrics, because that's a contractor. They don't know what they're doing. You kind of have to argue with them. Like, no, this doesn't say the right place. And you're like, no, it's fine. It's on the Department of State website. Another common question is about those fees. Well, what if I cancel my appointment? Well, they'll refund the fees back into your account, but not back to you. Once you pay that money, you ain't getting it back, right? It's there. You can cancel the appointment, refund it to your account, and then reuse it for another appointment. But sometimes people are like, well, I scheduled an appointment in Mexico, pay the fees, but now I'm trying to schedule an appointment in Canada. Can I transfer those fees? No. They may be the same web page you're using, but you're having to create two separate accounts, one for Mexico, one for Canada, and those fees do not cross generally, right? So whatever you paid in Mexico is Mexico. You have to pay separately to try to schedule an appointment in Canada. The other thing is when do I need a new DS-160? Typically, if you confirm a DS-160 and then it takes another 2 to 3 months to get your interview, obviously that's why we suggest don't confirm it until you're getting close to your interview. But typically a DS-160 remains valid unless information in it has changed, right? So if I confirm the DS-160, my interview is 3 months later, and in that 3 months, nothing in that DS-160 has changed, you should still be able to use it. But I don't know if you change jobs, right? Or you traveled a whole bunch, even including to the US, right? That means there's a bunch of information that in that DS-160 is now outdated, and you should do a new one and confirm it. And that's usually not a big deal either, right? We've had plenty of cases where we confirmed the DS-160 and that number was attached to your visa appointment, but then we had to do a new DS-160. So when they went to the interview, they walked in with a new paper confirmation they printed out. They're saying, hey, by the way, that one you got there, it's not up to date. Use this one. And we've never really had issues with that. So we have links for all these websites down below. We hope you find this information useful. Obviously, if you have any questions about this information, look us up on the socials to ask your questions, schedule a consultation. Unfortunately, these things can be, even the simple act of trying to schedule a visa can be really, really confusing. And we're here to help for all of this. Then stay tuned. We're hoping to do a later video where we just walk through sort of how to prepare for and what to expect at the actual visa interview, right? So when you go to the embassy and you're checking in, and then when you're standing in front of an officer, we're going to kind of delve into that in a separate video. But until then, we hope you find this is really, hope this information is really useful. As always, go to our website, hit us up on a consult, download our app, the Lawpilot Guardian, which is got a lot of useful information there. But until then, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.